In New York, Paloma is showing a house for rent to a potential client. She uses flowery language to embellish the qualities of the building and indirectly flirts by showing off her legs and cleavage. At the end of the tour, she claims she has several people interested in this house, so the man agrees to take the deal and immediately transfers the money. He also invites her to dinner, and Paloma accepts. She explains that the previous owners will be picking up a few remaining things in the afternoon, so they can meet here tonight after they're gone. That night, the man arrives with a bottle of wine, ready for the date. However, another guy opens the door and reveals he lives there with no intention of selling or renting. He never heard of Paloma either. The client immediately calls her, but the number no longer exists. It turns out Paloma is a scammer. She shows houses and apartments that she doesn't own to rich people who don't ask many questions, gets the first payment, and then disappears. She uses a different phone number, name, wig, and even accent each time so she never gets caught. At a bar, Paloma meets with her girlfriend Smith and they get naughty against the wall to celebrate another successful scam. Later at home, they do it again in the pool. Smith says "I love you," but Paloma only replies "same." When Smith calls her out, Paloma explains that only people who need to fill a void in their lives need those words and the two of them are above that. In the morning, Paloma checks her email and finds a message from Daisy Buchanan, which is a character from a famous novel. The IP address is the One Police Plaza, but Paloma thinks the cops would have hidden their IP and it's just someone phishing. Smith is scared and wants to leave since something similar happened to them in Baltimore, so Paloma reminds her that it had only been a blurry image on social media. It inspired a report on TV but nothing came out of it. Paloma replies to the email saying that the house they're looking for has already been taken, and hides her address using a VPN. Since Smith is still nervous, Paloma offers an idea for a game. They'll choose each other's targets and whoever closes the sale first chooses where they'll go next. Smith agrees to participate. Later the couple goes to the bookstore to check novels for inspiration for their next fake names. They also keep looking at ads for available houses that they can use. There's a house for rent that belongs to Robert, a neurosurgeon who is making great advances in his field. He's so good at his job that people from all over the world come to see him. The couple thinks he'll be a great target. At the hospital, Robert finishes an extremely hard surgery on a patient's brain. Afterward he has a chat with his boss Bradshaw, who thinks Robert does miracles. They discuss the matter of neurotransplantation, which Robert has achieved on animals. He wants to try on humans but hasn't gotten government approval yet. Bradshaw promises he'll fight for him. In the evening, Robert meets with Paloma, who pretends to be interested in renting his old house. Something peculiar about this place is that the servants' quarters were bricked up after it was discovered they were built over a cholera pit. Robert shares that he used to live here with his dead wife Rebecca, whose parents live a few houses down the street. When they shake hands to close the deal, Robert's wedding ring accidentally scratches Paloma's hand. He apologizes as he explains that the ring got mangled in the garbage disposal. Then he takes care of the wound and gives her the paperwork with everything she needs, like Wi-Fi password and alarm codes. In her new room, Paloma calls Smith to share her progress. She's already made a copy of the keys and disabled the cameras with the password Robert gave her, so now she only needs to find the potential clients. Paloma doesn't know that Robert is keeping an eye on the cameras and notices that she's turning them off. Sometime later Paloma invites a bunch of clients to see the house, but none of them are interested enough to close the deal. In the evening, a client named Tad arrives and Paloma thinks she's finally making progress. She invites him to the living room, where she forgot to turn off a security camera. Soon Robert gets an alert of multiple people there. Tad gets too handsy and Paloma turns him down as she steps away from him. He doesn't take no for an answer and steps closer to grab her by the hair, which causes her wig to come off. Paloma pushes him and tries to escape, but Tad grabs her by the neck and holds her against the wall to start touching her. After some struggle, Paloma manages to push him off again and falls to the floor. Tad grabs a knife and holds it against her neck as he tries to take advantage of her. All this is seen by Robert on the camera, so he immediately leaves his office. Meanwhile Paloma kicks the attacker and causes him to hit his head on the table. When she tries to run away, he grabs her leg and makes her fall again before slashing her neck. At the same time his wound is bleeding heavily, so he starts feeling dizzy. After he slashes Paloma again, Robert appears behind him and injects a sedative into his neck. Paloma tries to stand up, only to pass out as well. At the police station, detectives Diane and Crace are studying the case of the mysterious woman who has been scamming people all over New York. They have no information on her except that she uses names from literary characters. Diane confirms she sent the email and asks Crace to search every recent listing on popular house sites with names from novels. When Paloma finally wakes up, she finds herself in a hospital room. Robert checks on her and explains that he had to give her 10 units of blood. Then he pulls out the business card he found in her pocket, which has her fake name and classifies her as a realtor. He now knows she's a scammer and proceeds to scold her, saying she should use her intelligence to help others. After sedating her again, he stitches the wound on her neck. That night Paloma wakes up and disconnects all the machines to escape, only to discover that the door is locked. When she checks the window, she finds a brick wall blocking it. She yells at the security camera and pounds on the door to no avail. Then she takes her hairpin and a needle to pick the lock, which finally allows her to leave the room. In the corridor, she realizes she isn't in the hospital, she's in the house's secret room. A door suddenly slams and Paloma is startled by a dog barking. Suddenly Lenny appears behind her and captures her. Meanwhile, Smith finishes her sale and sends Paloma a message. At the same time, Robert is removing the blood-stained carpet and finds Paloma's phone and keys. He decides to hide the carpet in Paloma's car. Sometime later, a cop goes around the neighborhood with a picture of Tad, asking the neighbors if they've seen him. His wife reported him missing and his phone puts him in this area as his last location. Robert says he doesn't recognize him, but when the cop asks about any strange happenings in the area, Robert tells him about a car blocking a hydrant. He had it towed, so he tells the officer the company he called. While Robert watches old videos of Rebecca, Paloma wakes up in a cell to discover she's been chained to the floor. She desperately yells for help to no avail. Soon Robert brings her food and medicine, so she yells at him and tries to attack, but he just steps out of reach. Robert threatens to call the cops and Paloma actually wants him to do that, willing to admit her crimes if it gets Robert and Tad too. Robert leaves after telling her to eat, so Paloma throws the tray in fury before Lenny appears again. In the evening, Robert reveals he's used Paloma's DNA to find out more about her. He's got her full name and knows that her family died in a car accident 3 years ago. Meanwhile at the bar, Smith waits for Paloma and starts to worry about her absence. When Zach tries hitting on her, she sends him away. At that moment, Robert replies to her text pretending to be Paloma. Smith happily sends her an "I love you" and Robert replies "I love you too," causing Smith to get suspicious. She goes back to Zach and this time agrees to leave with him. Later, Paloma needs to pee, so Lenny handcuffs her to himself and takes her to a toilet outside her cell, where she's forced to do it in front of him. Paloma notices a scar on his head and tries to chat with him, but he doesn't answer. When Lenny takes her back, Robert changes the handcuffs for the chain and Paloma tries to use the chance to attack, but Lenny immediately overpowers her. She asks about Lenny, so Robert shares that he used to be a nurse at his hospital. 6 months ago, a drunk driver hit him and Lenny was left in a vegetative state, but the driver only got a suspended license. If Robert hadn't operated on him, Lenny would have spent all his life in bed connected to a machine. However, Paloma thinks that being an empty man isn't a life either. Robert leaves after turning off all the lights and Paloma starts playing with the drain cover until she manages to remove it. On the street, Smith arrives with Zach. She tells him that Robert is her best friend's abusive boyfriend and he's beaten them both up. Now she's afraid that her friend may have been locked up, so Zach grabs his gun and agrees to help. Robert opens the door when he hears knocking and Zach immediately pushes him to get inside. He searches every room and starts throwing things around, including a picture of Rebecca. When he insults her, Robert snaps and breaks a record so he can use a shard to slash Zach's neck, instantly killing him. Outside, Smith sees the lights being turned off and gets out of the car. Following the house blueprints, she walks to the back to look for a side entrance, unaware that there's a camera that immediately alerts Robert. While he grabs a knife, Smith finds a strange indent in the wall and tries to pull it open to no avail. Then she notices a keypad and remembers that Paloma told her the password, so she uses it to finally open the hidden door. With a gun in hand, she goes inside. Soon Robert follows her. When Smith enters the hidden area, she's startled by a dog in a cage, which starts barking at her. The noise alerts Lenny, who rushes to get his dart gun. In the cell, Paloma uses the drain cover to remove a screw from the chain, which allows her to free herself. She sneaks around until she finds an office and grabs a knife before returning to her cell, where she pretends to still be chained up. She hears someone approaching her from behind and quickly jumps to stab that person, thinking it's Robert. However, it's actually Smith, who collapses in her girlfriend's arms. Then Robert also enters the cell and Paloma begs for his help. He covers Smith's wound with his hand and asks her to stay still, but she's bleeding heavily. Paloma notices Smith's gun on the floor, but before she could grab it, Lenny appears and shoots her with a tranquilizer. She apologizes to Smith before passing out. Afterward, Robert goes to the living room to drink wine and watch a video of Rebecca doing a presentation on neurotransplantation for potential investors. Suddenly, Robert starts hallucinating that the Rebecca on the screen is talking to him and then appears in the room. She says that he's been given a golden opportunity to finish his experiments and that he has to do it for us. At the police station, Grace and Diane finally find Paloma's ad for Robert's house and notice the literary name, so they decide to check the place out. When Paloma wakes up, she's chained again and Smith is gone. She looks into the other room and discovers that Robert and Lenny are getting an unconscious Smith ready for surgery. To her shock, they also have Tad, who has been kept alive on purpose. Robert plans to do a brain transplant and ignores Paloma when she calls him a monster. Paloma watches in horror how Robert cuts Smith's head open and she has to cover her ears when he starts using the drill. She starts having a breakdown that causes her to hallucinate Smith telling her she loves her. Paloma tries reaching for her, however the hallucination disappears when Robert removes a piece from Smith's brain and she dies. A desperate Paloma tries to make him see reason, but it's too late. Robert puts a piece of Smith's brain into Tad's head and wakes him up. At first, Tad has some difficulty moving, but soon he gains enough control of his body to leave the stretcher and enter the cell. He falls on his knees in front of Paloma and mentions Baltimore, revealing it's actually Smith's brain controlling the body. Paloma tells her she loves her and Smith replies same for further confirmation. As Paloma apologizes, the body squirms and Tad comes out to insult her. Paloma pushes him off and Robert rushes to bring him out of the cell. Paloma furiously yells at him, promising he'll kill him. Tad's body is struggling with having two minds in his head, so he lunges toward the wall. His exposed brain is crushed by the bricks, so he falls dead. At that moment, Robert's camera alerts him of Diane and Grace at his front door. Robert screams in frustration and tells Lenny to get Paloma ready before he runs out. Seconds later, Robert appears outside all cleaned up with his dog, pretending he's just coming back from his walk. He lets the detectives inside and Diane notices all the cameras. When she asks to see the footage, Robert explains his tenants like turning them off but agrees to give them the little footage he has. Then Diane shows him the ad with his house, so he tells her that he didn't post it. He admits he had a guest recently and mentions the other fake Paloma used, which is also a literary character. Diane finds it suspicious that a surgeon with his amazing salary wants to rent his house, but since he's doing nothing illegal, Crace points out they can't bother him anymore, so they leave. When Robert looks in the mirror, he finds Rebecca telling him that he may not be able to do this alone. Robert screams in frustration again before calling Bradshaw. On the street, Diane tells Crace all the weird things she noticed in the house. No water bowl for the dog, carpet tape on the floor but no carpet, and a small spot on the wall with new paint. Not to mention that 2 literary names in the same house in the same week can't be a coincidence. Unfortunately, Crace reminds her they still don't have enough to do anything to him. In the lab, Lenny is shaving Paloma's hair while she keeps talking about family and love, saying that the real Lenny must still be in that body. When he takes her back to the cell, she tells him they should escape together. Lenny drags her to the surgery area to grab Smith's gun and give Paloma the handcuffs keys. After quickly taking the cuffs off, Paloma gives Smith's body a goodbye kiss and takes her ring. At that moment, Lenny uses the gun to self-delete. Hearing this, Robert rushes to recapture Paloma and sedates her before throwing her in the back of his van. Sometime later, Paloma wakes up strapped to a stretcher with a video of Rebecca playing on the wall and classical music on the speakers. Robert says that these are to stimulate the recipient before the transplant. At the police station, Crace and Diane are watching Robert's footage of the front door camera. Nobody appears on it, but Diane points out that it rained on Monday yet there's nothing wet on the screen. This means Robert messed with the footage. For the next few hours, Paloma can't move her body at all and she's forced to watch all the videos. Eventually Robert comes back with another body. It's Rebecca, who isn't actually dead. She's in a coma because of a degenerative brain disease and Robert has been keeping her alive for years. Rebecca and Paloma have the same blood type, so Robert will do the surgery. Paloma has a breakdown and says she hopes he ends up like Tad. With Paloma still awake, Robert cuts open her head. At first she laughs, but that changes into screaming when Robert gets the drill. Moments later Bradshaw arrives to see the results of the experiment. Paloma begs for help, but Bradshaw is disgusted by all the lines Robert has crossed and steps out of the room. When Bradshaw wonders how many people were killed for this, Robert swears this is the first one. He points out that Paloma is a scammer that nobody will miss and this experiment could save millions of people, but Bradshaw knows that he's only doing it for Rebecca and calls it playing God. Refusing to be part of this, Bradshaw leaves. In the car, Bradshaw tries calling 911. However, Robert appears next to him and stabs him. In the police station, Crace and Diane learn that Robert's neighbors heard a gunshot last night. Between this and the fake footage, they have enough for a warrant. When Robert returns to the lab, he finds the stretcher empty. Suddenly Paloma tries to attack him from behind and Robert pushes her off, but she still manages to slash his chest with a scalpel before he captures her and puts her back on the stretcher. Afterward Robert washes up to get ready for the surgery. He keeps thinking about Rebecca and screaming in front of the mirror. On the street, Crace and Diane surround the building with a SWAT team. They bring down the front door and Diane goes inside, but they find nothing. Crace goes around the back and finds the other entrance, so he tells the team to follow him. Meanwhile Robert cuts off a big part of Rebecca's brain. Then he does the same to Paloma and proceeds to do the transplant. By the time the cops reach the surgery area, they find a bunch of bodies but no sight of Robert or Rebecca. A few houses down the street, Robert is hiding in Rebecca's parents' home. Eventually Rebecca wakes up and Robert is happy to finally see his wife conscious and sane. Sometime later, Robert is helping Rebecca move again. She wonders who the body used to belong to, so he just says that the donor didn't survive the procedure. Months later, Robert and Rebecca are happily living in a cabin near the woods. Suddenly Rebecca slashes Robert's neck, revealing that Paloma has been in charge the whole time and only pretended until she was fully recovered to get her revenge. She puts on Smith's ring again and smokes while she enjoys watching Robert bleed to death. Make sure to subscribe and turn on notifications so you can watch more videos like this. Thanks for watching.